Hi, I'm Mike Ellick, and today we're going to be looking at the Agfa Isolette III, a folding camera made in the 1950s and 1960s. I tend to believe that if it was sold in the 1960s, it probably wasn't sold for that long, because by the time the 1960s rolled around, there were two things happening. One is you had a lot of imports from Japan, mostly 35mm SLRs. You had Pentax, you had Nikon, you had Canon to a degree, you had Minolta getting ready to step in, so Olympus, so you had a lot of different lower cost competition. And the second thing that happened is that the market was starting to move away from the folding camera. There's nothing wrong with the folding camera, but it just wasn't seen as the most modern and up-to-date offering. After all, the folding camera had been with us in one form or another really since the late 1800s. So by the time the 1960 rolled around, it seemed very, very old-fashioned in some ways. Now, one thing is that they certainly are capable of excellent results. Now let's talk a little bit about the Agfa. First of all, there were three cameras. The first camera sold was, here we are, was this model. It had a Solinar lens, which is a Tessar type. It was set in a Compier synchro shutter, which meant it had a full range of speeds. All of the Agfa Isolette 3s, they all have what's known as an uncoupled rangefinder, which I'll explain later. They all take 120 film, still available today, and generally they all operate the same. The second model came with an Apertar lens, which is a triplet. It's one step down from the Solinar. It was set in a less expensive Pronto shutter, and if you notice, this one doesn't have a full range of speeds. This one, it only has 4 speeds plus B. B is bulb, which means the shutter stays open for as long as you keep your finger on the shutter release. Once you lift your finger from the release, the shutter closes. The final model, now both of these, the lenses are f4.5, the fastest lens. Now with the final model, this moved up to an f3.5, let me see if you can see that right there, an f3.5 Solinar. And if you notice, it's set a little bit deeper. Probably the same, but it just looks a bit different. Now this came in a Prontor shutter. This Prontor had a full range of shutter speeds, but its maximum speed is 1/300th of a second compared with 1/500th of a second for the top speed on a Compier. As I mentioned, they all operate the same. They're known as what's a self-erecting camera, which means when you press, this has 2 buttons on top. This is the shutter release, and this releases the lens. So when you press this button to release the lens bed, it folds down, closes, and locks in place. Watch. Very quick. I'll do that again from the side. Of course, when you do that, you want to have a firm grip on the camera, because otherwise the momentum of the camera can just take it and right to the ground. Never good for a camera, right? These had some pretty good features. It has a small sliding door. The idea is that as you wind from frame to frame, wait for the frame number to show up in the red window, and then when you're ready to take, after you have the frame aligned for your next shot, just close the little door. Protects the film from being exposed to any stray light, even though you have that thick paper backing. This has an accessory shoe, not a hot shoe, an accessory shoe. So if you want to take a flash photo, you'd slide your flash in, then you take your cable, your synchronization cable, and plug it into the side of the shutter. For this shutter, it's right here. On this shutter, your post is right here. And on this shutter, it's up here. See, so it's in several different locations, depending on which camera you have. Now the way you focus your camera is you peer through your viewfinder. In the center of the viewfinder is a small circular spot. You turn the dial until your subject is correctly aligned within that small circular spot. Once you've achieved focus, you read the distance from the scale. In this case it's 4, and then you set your lens to that same setting. So in this case, what you would do is you rotate the lens until it's set to, also set to 4. Oh, you also must tension the shutter, like so. Remember to set your shutter speed, so you'll need a light meter. Set your aperture. In this case, your aperture setting is right on the front of the camera. Lift your camera to the eye. Hold the camera steady. This is where it's very easy to hold the camera in the palm of your hand. Keep your thumb and your fingers out of the way of the lens. Lift the camera to your eye. Take your photo. Now the big question is, what film do I use? Because it takes 120 film, you can use pretty much anything. This happens to be a roll of color Ektar. You can use black and white. You can use slide film if you can still find it. You can use infrared film, but you need a special filter in the front. Most people will just use black and white or color print film. Ektar is supposedly a very fine grained film. Whatever you use, it's up to you. So you tear open the packet. I'm going to show you how to load the camera. Tear open the packet. And you completely remove the paper backing, the little paper ring. You'll see it. There's a little seal right here. Just break it with your fingers. Now you want to completely remove this. And the reason is because when you load your film into the camera, before you load your film, always make sure that you don't see a number in here. If you see a number in here, it means you have film in that camera. Open the back. There's a little slide switch on the side. See how it just pops open? Open the back. And the reason you completely remove the paper backing is because if you don't, some of it might end up in here and block your lens. That would be bad. Now this has a small holder to hold the roll film. Just slide that out. See how it's hinged on this one side? It makes it easy. So there's this little post right here. Align that with the hole in the end of the roll of film. You can fold this down. It's going to be a tight fit sometimes, but that's okay. Alright, so it's locked into place here. Pull out the tongue of the film or the leader, whatever you want to call it. We all know what it means. Now there's a small slot in the take-up spool, and you can see the small slot right there. Take this paper leader, insert it into that slot. What I usually do is I'll hold my finger against it. Then you start winding. You can wet your finger a little to pull it to the side. There. Start winding. There's going to be 2 arrows that come up. Put your finger down, make sure it's nice and tight against this roll. Okay. I just go ahead and close the back now. Open your window and keep winding. And what you're going to do is, with roll film, you never rewind the film. You just wind it from your new fresh spool film onto your take-up spool. And then once it's finished, you just keep winding until the very end. Now you'll wind and you'll wind. Pretty soon you're going to see either, it depends on the roll of film. You'll either see some dots, or you will see some arrows. See? You can see the arrow. Now watch. As we get closer, that tells you that you're getting closer to your first frame. Okay, in this case, you see the word Kodak. I'm going to turn it up right side up. See how it says Kodak? Okay, so we'll wind. Number 1. Center number 1 in there. Close your door, and you're ready for your first roll to take your first photo. Like I said, make sure you set your aperture, your shutter speed. Don't forget to tension the shutter, focus, frame your shot, and click. You're good to go. Now we're going to talk about buying an Agfa Isolette III. Wonderful camera, but there are several things that you have to look out for. Agfa used a lubricant. For some reason it's turned green, and it makes the lens very hard to focus. As you can tell, this one's a little bit tough. Some of them are actually frozen. In fact, it's so hard that you'll be unable to turn this at all. Unfortunately, that lubricant was also used in the focusing wheel. So on some cameras, you'll be able to focus very easily, and some it will be very sluggish, and on some this wheel will not turn at all. The third thing to watch out for any Agfa is the use of the plastic bellows, and you can see how shiny these are, and these are plastic bellows. I think they worked fine when they were first released, but by now many of them have pinholes. And the way you test for pinholes, you take your flashlight, go into a dark room, and you just put the flashlight in here. And what you want to do is you want to see if there's any light escaping from the bellows. The other way is to go into the dark room and look into the lens chamber here, and do the same thing. Run your flashlight all around it. If you see any pinholes, those are going to have to be repaired. You can repair them sometimes with gaffer's tape. I find gaffer's tape works a little bit better. Maybe you can try some fabric paint, that might work. But in the end, you'll probably have to replace the bellows. This camera has the original bellows. Now you can see, let's turn the light back on. You can see how the bellows are sort of shiny, but they're not like overly shiny. See, on this one they're really shiny, and you can see that they're plastic. On this camera, these are leather bellows, and leather has held up much better over the years than plastic. In this camera, I believe I replaced the bellows because the old plastic bellows had just worn through. And so these bellows are of course in much better shape because they of course are leather again. Now here's one where I got the bellows from another Agfa camera, but the bellows were only in so-so condition, but still, no holes, they're leather bellows, and they work.